The alarm cut through the kitchen before I even smelled the smoke from the pan. Red light, 3 short pulses. Then the voice of the ship itself, calm and cold, telling everyone that an unknown vessel had matched our speed and was closing fast. I set the pan down without spilling a drop of the sauce I was making. That was the first thing nobody noticed. Hands do not shake when they have been trained not to shake, even when the mind wants to shake for them. My name is Ethan Marlowe. On this ship, I am the cook. Nothing more. That is what I tell everyone, and for 2 years, everyone believed it. The ship is called the Kindred Star, and it belongs to a trading captain named Naira Vashti. She is not human. Her people, the Thessarai, have skin the color of a deep evening sky, and eyes that catch light like water catches the moon. She picked me up on a supply station on the edge of human space, back when I had nothing but a bag, a false name, and a debt I did not want to talk about. She needed a cook. I needed to disappear. It worked well for both of us. Until today. I walked out of the kitchen into the narrow hallway just as Naira came down from the bridge, her long coat snapping behind her with the speed of her steps. She did not look afraid. Thessarai rarely look afraid, even when they are, but her jaw was tight and her eyes moved fast, doing the math that captains do when danger is close and options are few. "Marlowe," she said, seeing me, "get below and stay there." "What's out there?" "A raider ship, unmarked. They want our cargo, or they want us. Either way, you are not useful in a fight, so go below." I almost laughed. Not useful in a fight. If she only knew. I did not go below. I followed her partway up the corridor instead, staying just behind the science officer, a quiet alien named Doran Kesh, who moved with the stiff steps of someone who had never been shot at and hoped that streak would continue. The ship rocked once, hard, as something struck our outer hull. Not a killing blow, a warning shot, meant to make us slow down and open our cargo bay. "They are hailing us," said the navigator, a small, sharp-eyed woman named Mira Thale, from her station near the front of the bridge, demanding we drop shields and let them board. "Reject it," Naira said. "Owen, get engines to full burn. We run." Owen Marsh, our engineer, a broad-shouldered man from a farming colony out past Jupiter, was already moving before she finished the sentence. But I had spent enough years reading engine rooms in my sleep to know what Naira did not yet know. The Kindred Star was an old cargo hauler. Her engines were strong for pulling weight, not for running. Whatever ship was chasing us was built for speed. We were not going to outrun it. I could feel that truth, the way I used to feel a bad plan before it fell apart. Another impact rocked the hull, this one closer to the crew quarters. Lights flickered. Somewhere below, a pipe screamed as pressure shifted. "Captain," Mira called out, voice rising, "they're preparing to fire again. Bigger this time. I don't think that one was a warning." I stepped further onto the bridge without permission, because some instincts do not ask for permission. I looked at the display showing the enemy ship's shape, its engine glow, the pattern of its approach. It was a boarding raider, built to disable, not destroy, which meant they wanted us alive and our cargo intact. That was useful information. Information changes everything in a fight, if you know how to use it. "Don't fire back," I said. Every head on the bridge turned toward me. The cook, giving orders. It must have sounded strange, even foolish, coming from a man who spent his days chopping vegetables and turning ration packs into something that tasted like a real meal. Naira's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? They're not trying to kill us. Look at the way they're closing, the angle, the spread of their shots. They want the ship whole. If you fire back, you give them a reason to stop being careful. Let them think we're weak. Let them come closer." "And do what, exactly?" I did not answer right away, because the honest answer would have said too much. Instead, I said the version that sounded like guesswork instead of memory. "Cut engines for 3 seconds when they get within range. It'll look like a system failure. They'll ease off their approach to avoid a crash, and that gap will slow their firing solution. just enough time for Mira to fake a distress signal on a frequency raiders always monitor, claiming pirates are already looting us. Raiders don't like sharing a kill. They'll hesitate. Nobody moved. The ship rocked again, less violent this time, more like a nervous shiver through the metal. Naira studied me for a long moment, the kind of look that measures a person all the way down. Then she turned back to her crew. "Do it," she said. "Cut the engines on my mark." I do not know what surprised me more, that she trusted a plan from her cook, or that the plan worked exactly the way I said it would. 3 seconds of silence in the engines. The raider ship drifted its angle, cautious, exactly as predicted. Mira's fake distress call went out on the right frequency, her voice steady, even though her hands trembled on the controls. For a long 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the raider ship peeled away, curving off toward open space, chasing a lie instead of a truth. The bridge let out a breath as one. "Convenient guess," Naira said quietly, not looking away from me. "For a cook." "I read a lot," I said. "Cooking gives you time to think." She did not smile, but something behind her eyes shifted, like a door easing open just a crack, then closing again before anyone could see through it. "Go finish dinner, Marlowe," she said, "before it burns." I turned and walked back toward the kitchen, my pulse finally settling into its normal rhythm, the one I had spent 2 years training myself to keep, even when the world outside was falling apart. Behind me, I heard Doran Kesh mutter something to Mira, low enough that he thought I could not hear it. Where did a cook learn to read a boarding pattern like that? I did not answer, because I was not supposed to hear the question, and because the honest answer was a story I had buried a long time ago, under false names and quiet kitchens, and years of pretending to be smaller than I was. That night, after the crew had eaten and the ship had returned to its slow, steady hum through open space, I stood alone in the galley, washing pots that did not need washing, because my hands needed something to do besides remember. I thought I had left that life behind for good. I thought a kitchen on a trading ship, far from anyone who knew my old name, was far enough, safe enough. But some things follow you no matter how far you run. And something told me, standing there with soap on my hands and the hum of the engines in my ears, that today was only the first crack in a wall I had spent 2 years building. I did not know yet how right I was. The next attack came 4 days later, and this time there was no warning at all. I was slicing bread when the whole ship lurched sideways, hard enough to send a stack of plates crashing to the floor. No alarm had sounded yet. Whatever hit us had come in silent, which meant it was not a raider looking for cargo. Raiders wanted us found. Whoever this was wanted us gone before anyone even knew they existed. I dropped the knife and moved. By the time I reached the corridor outside the bridge, smoke was pouring from a burst conduit near the engineering deck, and Owen Marsh was shouting into his comm unit, trying to raise Naira, who was not answering. Mira was pinned against a bent support beam, her leg trapped beneath a fallen panel, blood running down her forehead from a cut above her eye. "Where's the captain?" I asked, already crouching beside Mira, already checking the panel for the fastest way to lift it without hurting her further. "Boarding pod," Owen said, panic sharpening his voice. "They hit the aft airlock. She went to seal it herself before it opened all the way. I can't reach her." Something in me went very quiet, not calm the way I had trained myself to be calm in the kitchen. This was older, colder. A version of quiet I had not let myself feel in 2 years, because feeling it meant remembering who I used to be before I learned to hide behind a chopping board and a friendly smile. "Get her to the medical bay," I told Owen, nodding at Mira. "I'll handle the airlock." "You?" "Marlowe, that's a boarding breach. You don't understand what's—" "I understand exactly what it is," I said, and something in my voice must have carried more weight than it should have, because Owen stopped arguing and simply nodded, lifting Mira as gently as his shaking arms allowed. I ran. The aft corridor was narrower than the rest of the ship, built for storage more than movement, which was exactly why whoever hit us chose it. Smoke thickened the air near the airlock door, and beneath the smell of burning wire, I caught something else. Ozone. The kind of smell that comes from a cutting tool built to slice through metal in seconds. Naira was there, pressed against the wall beside the airlock control panel, blood on her sleeve, her weapon drawn, but her hands working the controls at the same time, trying to do two things no one can do well at once. Two figures in dark armor were already through the outer door, cutting into the inner seal. I did not think. Thinking is slow. My body simply remembered, the way it always did when the moment demanded something faster than thought. I crossed the distance between us in the time it takes most people to notice danger at all. The first armored figure turned toward the sound of my footsteps, weapon rising, and I was already inside his reach before the weapon finished its arc, my hand catching his wrist, turning it aside, using his own momentum to put him against the wall hard enough that the weapon fell from his grip and skidded across the floor. The second one fired. I felt the shot graze my shoulder, a line of heat that would hurt later but did not matter now, and I closed the distance before a second shot could follow the first, disarming him with the same economy of motion I had once used 100 times in a life I never talked about. Neither man was seriously hurt. I made sure of that, even in the middle of it, some old rule inside me refusing to let the moment become worse than it needed to be. Within seconds, both were down, weapons scattered, and the airlock's outer door slammed shut on Naira's command, sealing the breach before anything else could come through. Silence rushed in behind the chaos. Naira stood frozen against the wall, staring at me, her weapon still raised but forgotten in her hand, her breath coming fast. I stood over two disarmed attackers, my shoulder bleeding through my shirt, my heart beating steady and slow, the way it always did once the danger had already passed and there was nothing left to do but stand in the wreckage of it. "Marlowe," she said, and her voice had lost every trace of the calm command I usually heard from her. "What was that?" I looked down at my hands, at the two men groaning on the floor, at the blood soaking into my sleeve, and for one long moment I considered lying again. It would have been easy. I had done it for 2 years. One more lie, wrapped in exhaustion and adrenaline, and she might have let it go, at least for tonight. But something in her eyes told me she would not let it go. Not this time. "Later," I said instead. "Right now, you're bleeding, Mira needs a medic, and there might be more of them." She held my gaze a moment longer, something sharp and searching in her expression, then nodded once and turned to secure the corridor, calling for backup from the rest of the crew. We spent the next hour clearing the ship, confirming the breach was sealed, checking every deck for further intrusion. There was none. Whoever sent those two had meant it as a probe, not a full assault, a test to see how the ship would respond. I did not say that thought out loud, but I recognized the pattern the moment I saw it, because I had run probes like that myself, a lifetime ago, against enemies who never saw them coming. By the time the ship was declared secure, my shoulder had been wrapped by the medical officer, a soft-spoken alien named Grace Linden who did not ask questions while she worked, though her eyes lingered on the wound a moment longer than necessary, noting how clean and precise it was, how little it seemed to bother me, despite the pain it should have caused. I found Naira alone on the bridge afterward, staring out at the stars, her uninjured hand resting on the edge of her chair. "The two men we captured," she said, without turning around. "They won't talk. Professional silence, the kind that comes from training, not loyalty." I noticed. "You would," she said, and this time she did turn, her eyes meeting mine with a directness that made it hard to look away. "Ethan Marlowe, cook. 2 years on my ship. Never late, never lazy, never remarkable, except for 2 things. You move like someone who has done this before, and you just took down 2 armed men without killing them, without hesitating, and without breaking a sweat." I did not answer right away. "I checked your records after the raider attack 4 days ago," she continued. "Your papers say you worked in a supply depot before joining my crew. Nothing before that. No family listed, no history, just a name and a start date, like you appeared out of nothing. People run from things, I said quietly. Sometimes running means leaving the past exactly where it was. I understand running, Naira said, and something in her voice softened, just slightly, just enough for me to hear the truth underneath it. My people do not trust easily, and I did not choose this crew by accident. I chose people who needed somewhere to disappear as much as I needed people who would not ask why I needed to disappear myself. But Ethan, whoever you were before you started slicing bread in my kitchen, it is starting to follow you here, and it almost cost Mira her life today. The words landed harder than any physical blow could have. I know, I said. Then you also know I cannot protect this crew from a threat I do not understand. If someone is hunting you, I need to know who and why before it costs more than a cut on your shoulder. I looked past her, out at the stars scattered endlessly beyond the viewport, and thought about how easy it would be to keep lying, to invent one more cover story and buy myself a little more time hiding in a kitchen that had, somehow, over 2 quiet years, become the closest thing to a home I had allowed myself in a very long time. But lies had already stopped working. The truth was catching up to me, whether I wanted it to or not, and pretending otherwise would only put more people I cared about in its path. Give me a few days, I said finally. I'll tell you everything. But Naira, once you know, you may wish you never asked. She held my gaze without flinching, the same steady courage she brought to every storm the ship had ever sailed through. I have never regretted knowing the truth, she said, only regretted not knowing it soon enough. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of 2 years of silence beginning, finally, to crack apart. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the small crew quarters I had called mine for 2 years, staring at a small metal case hidden beneath a loose panel in the floor, a case I had not opened since the day I boarded this ship. Inside it were the only things I had kept from my old life, a set of dog tags with a name that was not Ethan Marlowe, a faded photograph of people who did not know if I was alive or dead, and a rank insignia that, if anyone in the wider galaxy ever saw it, would tell them exactly who and what I used to be. I sat with that case in my lap for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the engines, knowing that whatever came next would change everything Naira Vashti thought she knew about her quiet, unremarkable cook. 3 days later, Naira called me to her private quarters, and I knew the time for hiding had finally run out. Her room was smaller than I expected for a captain, simple and orderly, with a single window looking out at the endless dark. She stood near it when I entered, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable in the way only someone who has spent a lifetime commanding others can manage. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. "And Ethan, I want the truth, all of it." I sat down slowly, the small metal case from my quarters resting on my knees, heavier than its size should have allowed. "My name really is Ethan," I said. "Marlowe is not a lie, exactly. It was my mother's name, before she married, but Ethan Marlowe, the cook who joined your crew 2 years ago, is not the whole truth of who I am." I opened the case and set the dog tags on the small table between us. Naira leaned forward slightly, studying the engraved name stamped into the metal. Ethan Calder Voss, designation 7. That name, I continued, belonged to a soldier, a human soldier, from a program most people never knew existed, and the ones who did know were too afraid to speak of it. What kind of program? I took a slow breath, feeling the old weight settle back onto my shoulders, the weight I had spent 2 years trying to set down. 15 years ago, before most of the galaxy knew humans existed beyond our own solar system, an alien empire called the Korath found us first. They did not come to talk. They came to take, the way a wave takes a shoreline, without asking permission and without looking back. Entire colonies vanished in a matter of weeks. Earth's governments did not have ships fast enough or weapons strong enough to fight back in any way that mattered. Naira's eyes had gone very still, the way they did whenever she was listening with her whole attention rather than simply waiting for her turn to speak. "So a program was built," I said. "A quiet one, buried under a dozen false names, meant to create something the Korath would not expect. Soldiers who did not fight like armies fight. Small teams, trained past the point most people would call reasonable, sent in ahead of every major engagement to break the Korath's plans before their fleets ever arrived. We called ourselves ghost units, because officially we did not exist. No records, no names, just designations and orders, and a war nobody at home even knew was being fought in their name. And you were part of this." "I was Designation 7, I said quietly. "For 6 years, I did things I do not talk about, in places I try very hard not to remember, so that colonies most people will never know the names of could keep existing. We stopped 3 separate Korath advances before they ever reached inhabited systems. We saved more lives than most people could count in a lifetime." "That sounds like something to be proud of," Naira said carefully. "It should be," I agreed. "And for a long time, I told myself it was, until the final mission." The room went very quiet. Outside the window, the stars did not care what I was about to say, did not pause or wait, simply continued their slow, indifferent drift across the dark. The Korath had a command station hidden inside a moon on the edge of a system we were supposed to protect, I said. Command believed destroying it would end the war outright. My team was sent in to plant the charges. What Command did not tell us, what they chose not to tell us, was that the moon's base was not only a military installation, it was also a labor camp, holding thousands of captured colonists the Korath had taken over the previous year. People from Earth, families, children. I heard my own voice change as I spoke, losing the careful, practiced calm I had worn like armor for 2 years. We found out only after we had already begun placing the charges. My team leader radioed Command, told them what we had found, asked for new orders. Command's answer came back in less than a minute. Complete the mission. The moon's destruction was worth more, strategically, than the lives inside it. Naira did not speak. She simply watched me, her expression carrying no judgment, only a steady, patient attention that somehow made the words easier to say. "I refused," I said. "My team leader refused with me. We disabled the charges instead, and spent the next 11 hours finding a way to free every prisoner in that base before the Korath reinforcements arrived. We got almost everyone out. Almost. 2 of my team did not make it home that day, and Command labeled the entire mission a catastrophic failure. When we returned, instead of medals, we were told our unit had become a liability, too independent, too willing to disobey orders that we believed were wrong. Within a month, the ghost units were quietly disbanded, and every soldier in them was given a choice: vanish completely, take a new identity, and never speak of what we had done, or face charges for insubordination during wartime that would have ended with most of us in a cell for the rest of our lives. "You chose to vanish," Naira said softly. "I chose to become nobody," I said, "because being somebody, in that world, meant being a weapon people could point wherever they wanted, regardless of what it cost the people caught in the blast. I did not want to be that anymore. So I became Ethan Marlowe. I learned to cook because it was as far from that old life as I could imagine, a job built entirely around keeping people fed and comfortable instead of keeping them alive through violence. I drifted from station to station for a while, then found your ship, and for 2 years, it worked. I stopped looking over my shoulder. I started to believe I really had left that person behind. But someone did not let you leave him behind, Naira said. I nodded slowly. The 2 men who boarded us were not raiders. Their armor, their silence, their training, all of it matched a private security contract that only one organization in known space still uses. A company that absorbed what remained of Earth's old military programs after the war ended, including whatever files still existed on the ghost units. Someone, somewhere, found a record with my old designation on it, and decided that a soldier who once refused a direct order and who knows secrets that program never wanted made public was worth finding again. Why now, after 2 years of silence? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe someone finally cross-referenced the right database. Maybe I made a mistake somewhere and let my old habits show through more than I realized. Whatever the reason, they are not going to stop with one probe. Organizations like that do not send 2 soldiers and walk away when it fails. They send 20 next time, or 200. Naira was quiet for a long moment, absorbing everything I had told her, turning it over with the same careful attention she gave to every difficult decision I had watched her make over the past 2 years. "You put my entire crew in danger by staying here," she said finally, though there was no anger in her voice, only a captain weighing a hard truth. "You understand that, don't you?" "I do," I said, "and if you want me to leave at the next station, I will not argue. You have people to protect, and I have already put Mira in a medical bay once because of who I used to be." "That is not what I said," Naira replied, and something in her tone made me look up at her properly for the first time since I had begun speaking. "I said you put my crew in danger. I did not say you should leave it." "Naira." "Let me finish," she said, and I closed my mouth, waiting. "In 2 years, Ethan, I have watched you feed this crew through storms that should have broken us. I have watched you remember every small thing about every person on this ship, the foods Mira cannot stand, the way Owen always wants extra portions after a long shift in engineering, the quiet way Doran prefers to eat alone when he is homesick for his own star system. You have never once, in 2 years, given me a reason to distrust you. Not until you gave me one just now, by telling me the truth instead of continuing to hide it. That's not exactly reassuring." A faint, almost invisible smile touched the corner of her mouth. "It is meant to be. Ethan, my people do not measure worth by strength alone. We measure it by what someone does with the strength they carry. You had every skill needed to become a weapon that answers to no one, and instead you chose 11 hours in a burning moon base, freeing strangers, at the cost of everything that life had built for you. That is not the story of a dangerous man. That is the story of a man who was punished for having a conscience in a system that did not want one." I did not know what to say to that. 2 years of silence had prepared me for many possible reactions to this conversation: anger, fear, betrayal, dismissal. I had not prepared myself for understanding. "There is something else," I said quietly, because the truth, once it started coming out, seemed determined to finish the job completely. "The company hunting me will not stop at finding me. They will want the same thing Command wanted 15 years ago. Someone with my training who will follow orders without question. If they cannot recruit me back, they will try to silence me instead, permanently, so that what happened at that moon base never becomes public record. And if they trace me to your ship, Naira, that means every person on it becomes a witness they may decide they cannot afford to leave alive." The weight of that landed heavily in the small room, heavier than anything else I had said that night. "Then we prepare," Naira said simply, standing from her chair with the same quiet resolve I had watched carry this ship through every storm I had witnessed in 2 years. "You are not the only one on this crew who has learned how to survive against odds that should have ended us, Ethan. We will face whatever comes together, or not at all." "You barely know the man I really am," I said. "You only just learned my real name tonight." "I know the man who has fed this crew for 2 years without asking for anything in return," she said, stepping closer, her eyes steady on mine. "I know the man who moved without hesitation to save Mira's life, even after 2 years of pretending he could not move that way at all. Names change, Ethan. Histories change. But 2 years of watching how someone treats the people around them, that tells me far more truth than any old military file ever could. For the first time since I had boarded this ship, I let myself believe, just a little, that the walls I had spent 2 years building did not have to come crashing down when someone finally saw what was behind them. "They will come again," I said, "soon, and in greater numbers." "Then we will be ready," Naira said. "But Ethan, whatever happens next, I need you to understand something clearly. On this ship, you are not a weapon that answers to someone else's orders anymore. You are part of this crew, and this crew protects its own." I looked down at the dog tag still resting on the table between us, the old name stamped into worn metal, a name I had buried for 2 years beneath flour and spice and quiet kitchen mornings. For the first time since that moonbase, I did not feel like I was running from that name anymore. I felt like, perhaps, I was finally ready to carry it again, on my own terms this time, for people who had chosen to stand beside me rather than send me somewhere and forget what it cost. They found us 6 days later, and this time they did not send 2 men. The proximity alarm tore through the ship at the middle of the night cycle, and within seconds, every screen on the bridge lit up with the same terrible information. 4 ships, closing fast in a coordinated formation, their engine signatures matching heavy security cruisers, not raiders, not opportunists. This was the company Naira and I had spoken about, arriving exactly the way I had warned her they would, with numbers meant to leave no room for another failed probe. I was already moving before the second alarm pulse finished sounding, pulling the small metal case from beneath my quarters floor panel for the first time in 2 years, my hands steady in a way that surprised even me. By the time I reached the bridge, Naira was already giving orders, her voice cutting through the tension with the same calm command that had earned her crew's loyalty long before I ever arrived. "Owen, I need full power to the engines, now. Mira, plot every possible route through that debris field to the east. We need somewhere those cruisers cannot follow easily. Doran, seal every non-essential section of the ship and get Grace to the medical bay in case this goes badly." "Captain," Mira said, her voice tight, 4 cruisers, that formation, we cannot outrun that, and we definitely cannot outfight it." "I know," Naira said. Then she turned to me, and in her eyes I saw not fear, but a question, one she was trusting me to answer honestly. "Ethan, what do we do?" I set the metal case down on the console and opened it, pulling out the only piece of equipment inside it besides the dog tags, a small, worn communication device built to a specification no civilian channel would recognize. "They are not here to destroy the ship," I said, thinking fast, old training rising up through 2 years of rust like it had never left at all. "If they wanted us dead, they would have already opened fire from long range. They want me alive, which means this ship needs to survive long enough for me to give them exactly that, on my terms instead of theirs." "Absolutely not," Naira said immediately. "Naira, listen to me. That debris field Mira mentioned, it's old wreckage from a mining accident, dense enough to hide a small shuttle, but not dense enough to hide a ship this size for long. If I take one of the escape pods and lead their lead cruiser into that field, the other 3 will have to slow down to avoid losing contact with their own ship in the debris. That buys the Kindred Star enough time to break away in the opposite direction, toward the trade lane 2 systems over, where enough independent witnesses will make an open attack too costly for them to risk. And what happens to you in that debris field, alone, in an escape pod, against a security cruiser?" "I have done more with less," I said, and for the first time in 2 years, I let her see exactly how much truth lived behind those words. "There has to be another way," Naira said, and for a moment, the captain's composure cracked just enough to show the person underneath it, someone who did not want to watch a member of her crew walk willingly into danger on her behalf. "There isn't time to find one," I said gently. "Trust me the way you did during the raider attack, just this once more." She held my gaze for a long, silent moment, the kind that stretches far longer than the seconds it actually takes, and then she nodded, once, sharp and final, the way a captain nods when she has made peace with a decision she does not like but understands is necessary. "Go," she said, "and Ethan, come back. That is an order, not a request. I allowed myself a small, tired smile. Understood, Captain. The escape pod launched into open space 3 minutes later, and the moment its thrusters carried it clear of the Kindred Star's hull, I watched on the small display as the lead cruiser adjusted course, exactly as I had predicted, breaking away from the formation to pursue what looked like an easy, isolated target. The debris field swallowed us both within minutes, and the real work began. I had spent 6 years learning how to survive in situations exactly like this one, small and outmatched, using terrain instead of firepower, patience instead of speed. The pod systems were basic, nothing like the specialized equipment I had once carried into missions like this, but basic was often enough if you understood how to use it properly. I guided the pod through gaps in the wreckage, too narrow for the cruiser to follow directly, forcing it to slow its pursuit, forcing its pilot to make choices under pressure that a trained mind could predict 3 steps ahead. Twice, the cruiser fired warning shots that shattered nearby wreckage into a storm of metal fragments, and twice, I used that storm as cover, slipping the pod behind larger pieces of debris before the cruiser's sensors could reacquire a clean shot. On the open comm channel, exactly as I had planned, I finally let them hear my voice. "This is Designation 7, I said, using the old name deliberately, letting it carry the weight it was meant to carry. "You have spent considerable resources trying to find me. Congratulations, you succeeded. Call off the cruisers pursuing my former ship, and I will discuss terms." There was a pause, then a voice returned through the static, cold and businesslike, the voice of someone used to negotiating from a position of strength. "Designation 7. We were beginning to think the reports of your survival were exaggerated. Very well, terms discussed. Once you power down and allow boarding." "I did not say I would surrender," I replied calmly. "I said I would discuss terms. There is a significant difference, and you know it, because you have read my file. You know exactly what happened the last time someone tried to give me an order I found unacceptable." Another pause, longer this time. "The Moonbase incident is not relevant to this conversation." "It is entirely relevant," I said, "because it tells you precisely what kind of soldier you are dealing with. One who does not respond well to threats against people who have done nothing to deserve them. My former crew has already broken away and is currently transmitting a full account of this pursuit to 3 independent trade authorities along the route they are taking. If anything happens to that ship, or to me, that record becomes public within hours, along with everything I know about the Moonbase incident and every operation the Ghost units were ever ordered to run." The pause this time stretched long enough that I began to wonder if the pilot chasing me through the debris field would simply open fire and end the conversation by force instead of words. Then the cruiser's engines flared, and it began, slowly, to pull back. "Your terms," the voice said finally, tight with barely restrained anger, "are noted. This is not finished, Designation 7. "I did not expect it to be," I said, "but it is finished for today." The channel closed, and moments later, all 4 cruisers began withdrawing from the system entirely, retreating the way predators retreat when the cost of the hunt suddenly outweighs the reward. I sat alone in the small escape pod for a long moment afterward, watching the empty space where 4 warships had been only minutes earlier, feeling something loosen in my chest that had been tight for 2 long years. It was not over. Organizations like that did not simply walk away forever from something they wanted this badly. But for today, for this crew, it was enough. The Kindred Star found me an hour later, drifting quietly among the wreckage, and when the pod's hatch finally opened onto the ship's small landing bay, Naira was standing there waiting, along with the rest of the crew, all of them watching me step out with an expression I had never seen directed at me before. Not pity, not suspicion, something closer to respect, earned rather than assumed. "You're bleeding again," Grace said, already moving toward me with her medical kit, noting a shallow cut along my temple from a piece of debris that had come closer than I would like to admit. "It's not the first time this month," I said, managing a tired smile despite the exhaustion pulling at every part of me. Naira stepped forward, studying me with an intensity that made the rest of the crew fall quiet around us. "You bought us time," she said. "And you did it without a single shot fired from this ship." "That was the idea," I said. "Designation 7, she repeated slowly, testing the sound of it, the way someone tests a name they are trying to understand rather than simply hear. "That is who you truly are, isn't it? Not just a soldier who once made a difficult choice, but someone who has spent his entire life since then choosing, again and again, exactly which kind of person he wants to be, regardless of what any old file says he should be." "I'm still the same person who cooks your crew's meals," I said quietly. "That has not changed." "No," Naira agreed, a small, warm smile finally breaking through the exhaustion on her own face. "It hasn't. But now, at least, we all understand exactly how much more than that you have always been." The crew around us slowly began to disperse, returning to their stations, the ordinary rhythm of the ship reasserting itself the way it always did once a crisis had passed. But before I could follow them, Naira placed a hand gently on my arm, stopping me. "Thank you," she said simply, "for trusting us with the truth, and for coming back." "I made a promise," I said. "I intend to keep it." For the first time in 2 years, standing in that small landing bay, with blood on my temple and exhaustion in every muscle, I did not feel like a man hiding from his own past. I felt, for the first time in a very long while, like exactly who I was always meant to become. 3 weeks passed before the company sent word again, and when it came, it did not arrive as an attack. It arrived as a message, delivered through a neutral trade station where the Kindred Star had docked to resupply, addressed directly to Ethan Calder Voss, Designation 7, in language stripped of the cold threats I had expected. The company, it seemed, had spent those 3 weeks weighing the cost of continuing a fight that had already become too visible, too expensive, and too dangerous to their own reputation among the trade authorities, who now had my account of the moonbase incident sitting quietly in their records, ready to become public the moment anything happened to me or the people around me. The message offered something I had never expected to receive from that organization: silence. In exchange for silence, they would stop hunting me, permanently, if I agreed never to make the moonbase records public. No demands that I return to service. No further threats against my crew. Just an old, tired admission, buried in careful legal language, that pursuing me further had become a battle not worth its cost. I read the message twice, standing alone in the small galley that had become, over 2 years and then some, the closest thing to home I had allowed myself since the day I chose to disappear. Naira found me there an hour later, the message still open on the small terminal beside the cutting board. "Is it real?" she asked, reading it over my shoulder. "I believe it is," I said. "For now, at least. Organizations like that rarely give up entirely, but this buys peace, real peace, for longer than I expected to ever have again." "And the moonbase?" she asked quietly. "The families who never learned what really happened there?" I thought about that question for a long moment, turning it over the way I had turned over so many difficult choices in the 6 years I had spent as a soldier, and the 2 years since, as a man trying quietly to become someone else. "I think," I said slowly, "that some truths deserve to come out in their own time, not because someone is using them as a weapon to protect themselves, but because the people who lived through that day deserve to have their story told honestly, by someone who is not afraid of what it costs anymore." "You want to tell it," Naira said, understanding immediately, the way she always seemed to understand exactly what I meant before I had finished explaining it myself. "Eventually," I said, "not as a threat, not as leverage, just as the truth, given freely, when I am ready to give it, to people who deserve to finally understand what happened to the families they lost, and why some soldiers chose to disobey an order that would have condemned thousands of innocent lives." Naira was quiet for a moment, studying me with the same careful attention she had given me since the night I first told her the truth about who I really was. "You have changed," she said finally, "since that night in my quarters." "Have I?" "You stand differently," she said. "You used to walk through this ship like someone trying not to be noticed, every movement small, every word careful. Now you walk like someone who has finally stopped apologizing for the space he takes up in the world." I considered her words, testing them against how I actually felt, and found, to my quiet surprise, that she was right. 2 years of hiding had taught me to make myself small, to fold the soldier I had been into something safe and unremarkable, believing that was the only way to protect the people around me from what I used to be. But standing here now, with the truth finally spoken and the danger, for the moment, finally past, I no longer felt the need to shrink myself down to fit inside someone else's fear. I did not think I would ever feel that again, I admitted. Not after the moonbase, not after everything that came afterward. And now? Now, I said, I think I finally understand what my old commanding officers never did. Strength is not about how many orders you are willing to follow without question. It is about what you are willing to protect, and what you are willing to risk, when the order and your conscience finally come apart. Naira smiled, warm and genuine, the kind of smile I had only seen flash across her face in small, unguarded moments over the past 2 years. Moments I had treasured more than I ever let myself admit, even to myself. "The crew has been talking," she said, changing the subject with the ease of someone who has learned exactly when a conversation has reached its natural close. "Owen wants to know if Designation 7 still makes the same spice bread he made last week, or if that recipe belonged only to Ethan Marlowe, the cook." I laughed, the sound surprising me with how easily it came, how light it felt. After weeks of tension that had settled so deeply into my shoulders, I had almost forgotten what it felt like to laugh without effort. "Tell Owen," I said, "that the spice bread was never going anywhere. Some things do not need to change, even when everything else does." "Good," Naira said, "because this crew, myself included, has grown rather fond of both versions of you. The quiet cook who remembers exactly how everyone likes their meals, and the soldier who was willing to fly directly into danger to protect people who, not long ago, barely knew his real name. They are not two different people," I said quietly. "They never were. I think I just needed time to understand that myself." Naira stepped closer, her hand finding mine in a gesture that felt, after everything we had survived together, entirely natural, entirely earned. "Then perhaps," she said, "it is time you stopped thinking of this ship as simply a place to hide, Ethan, and started thinking of it as a place where you finally do not have to." I looked around the small, familiar galley, at the worn cutting board and the mismatched pots, at the small window showing the endless stars beyond the trade station where we had docked, and felt something settle inside me that had been unsettled since the day I first put on a uniform that was not truly mine to wear. "I think," I said slowly, "that sounds like exactly the kind of place I have been looking for." Word of what happened eventually spread, quietly at first, through trade routes and station gossip, the story of a cook aboard an independent trading vessel who had once been something far more, and who had chosen, when it mattered most, to protect his crew rather than disappear and let danger follow someone else instead. Some called it luck, others called it foolishness, but among the small circle of people who had actually lived through those weeks, who had watched an unremarkable man reveal exactly how remarkable he had always been, it was called something simpler: loyalty, freely given, and finally returned in kind. I never did release the full account of the moonbase incident, not then, not for a long while afterward, but I kept the promise I had made to myself in that small galley, that the truth would eventually be told, honestly and without fear, when the time was right, and the people who deserved to hear it were ready to listen. Until then, I remained exactly where I had chosen to be, aboard the Kindred Star, in a small kitchen that had become, against every expectation I once carried, the truest home I had ever known. Not hiding anymore. Simply, and finally, myself.